Hello and welcome to a video tutorial on the use of QGIS for archaeologists. This video tutorial is designed for those students currently undertaking the Diploma in Archaeological Studies at the Department of Archaeology and Anthropology at the University of Bristol. It aims to provide those students with a brief introduction to GIS and the use of digital spatial data, but to also provide those students with a way of getting their recent survey work, in particular the work done at Clifton Down Romana British Field System, onto modern OS maps using QGIS. We're using a program called QGIS or Quantum GIS. This tutorial is based upon Windows 7 PC rather than Mac version, so for those of you using a Mac you'll have to adapt accordingly. In a previous video tutorial I showed you how to download data from Digimap, and for the purpose of that tutorial and for this tutorial I've used a data set focused on Winterbourne Medieval Barn in South Gloucestershire, but you may well have downloaded data relating to Clifton Down. Once you've downloaded and installed QGIS, we're going to open it by double clicking the desktop icon, and the one that you're after says Quantum GIS Desktop. When you install the program you'll find there will be an awful lot of icons that have appeared on your desktop. The one you're after, as I said, is the one that says Desktop. Depending on the speed of your computer, it will take a while to load up, and you'll be introduced firstly to this screen. And the first thing that should appear will be this thing that says QGIS Tips. Now you can cycle through these tips by pressing Next or Previous, and this box will always appear every time you start QGIS unless you click this little box here, and it won't start up at the startup screen. I'm just going to click OK to remove it. And you're going to be introduced to this screen. Now, some people may have more icons or less icons at the top here, depending on the default installation. You can expand these or contract them according to your own desire and how you like your screens to be laid out. First thing to draw your attention to is this large white area here, which is your map screen. This is where the maps you downloaded from Digimap will appear when you ultimately load them in. As I move the cursor around, you will see that at the bottom these coordinates change accordingly. And when you load up your maps, eventually your coordinates will reflect something much more familiar to you, which will be the British National Grid. Next to this coordinate box at the bottom you have scale, which is fairly self-explanatory, but you have the option to select a series of scales, or if you want you can actually colour it blue, highlight it blue and just type in what you want. Okay, the last box on the right hand side that I want to draw your attention to is current CRS WGS84. This thing at the bottom, EPSG 4326, when you hover over it, it gives you, as I say, current CRS WGS84. Current CRS stands for Current Coordinate Reference System, and it at the moment is set to WGS84, which is the World Geodetic System of 1984, which you may remember from our class that is very useful for GPS because it takes the ellipsoid shape of the Earth into effect. But what we're trying to do here with GIS is transform something that's three-dimensional, as in the shape of the world, and represent it in 2 dimensions to go onto a map. The way we do that is through projected coordinate systems. Now I'm going to make a judgment here that the majority of you are going to be focused on the archaeology of Britain, in which case we're going to change these settings to automatically default to the British National Grid. For those of you who are interested in working abroad, you'll have to seek out the local grid reference system for the places in which you're interested in and you work in. But for today, for this tutorial, we're going to focus on the British National Grid. So the first thing we're going to do once we start QGIS for the first time is to go up to the Settings option and then down to Options. And in here you have a series of tabs. These things at the top are called tabs, and they all have various options in them. And you can play around with these to your heart's content. I'm going to leave most of these as default. But the one that I do want to change is this one here that says CRS, Coordinate Reference System. And you'll see at the top here it says Default Coordinate Reference System for new projects. Always start new projects with this CRS, and in this case it's wanting WGS84. This EPSG is a authority ID, like a shorthand code, think of it. So what we want to do is now change this WGS84 to the British National Grid. If you remember back to class, there were two triangulations undertaken in Britain. The most recent was undertaken between 1936 and 1953, and it's known as the Ordnance Survey of Great Britain Datum 1936. And it's important because all modern base maps from the OS are derived from this retriangulation. So what we want to do is select that coordinate reference system. So to do that, we're going to go to Select. You'll see here that I already have it in place, but you who are starting this for the first time won't have that there. So what you have to do is to go up to the filter option, and you want to type in OSGB. And what it's going to do is filter out all the coordinate reference systems of the world, for which there are hundreds here, and it's going to give you a list of ones to choose from. And we are after a projected coordinate system. We're not after a geographic one, we're after a projected. And in this case, we're going for OSGB 1936 British National Grid. And it has this authority ID 27700. Okay, but the main thing you're after is this British National Grid. Highlight it blue with one click, say OK. That's now stuck there. What I'd also like you to do is every time we load up a new layer, I want it to automatically default to the British National Grid as well. So I'm going to click on this Use Default CRS display below, the black. So there's a black dot inside the circle, and we're going to do the same process again. Select, find the Ordnance Survey 1936. If you don't have it in here, type it into the filter and it will appear at the bottom, and then say OK. But you'll notice that at the very bottom right, nothing's actually changed. It still thinks that it's WGS 84. What I want you to do now is actually close QGIS down, and I want you to reopen it. And what you'll find when QGIS ultimately reopens is that, get rid of that, at the bottom we now have EPSG 27700, and that is the British National Grid. And that means every time that you load up QGIS, it is automatically going to default to that from now on. It also thinks that everything you're going to load in wants to be in the British National Grid coordinate system. Right, so then, a little introduction to the screen. This is your map screen, as I said before, where your map's going to be displayed. And you can see that as I move around, the coordinates still change, the scales are still there. When I click on this white box that now highlights blue, it's called Layers, and in this Layers box is going to appear the files that you downloaded from Digimap. Their file names is going to appear here, and you'll be able to order these. So the ones on the top will be the dominant ones. They'll be the ones that you can see, and in order to see the ones that will appear beneath it, you either have to move them or turn them off. In the same way as if you had a real paper map and you put that on top of another paper map, the one underneath you wouldn't be able to see. It works in exactly the same way as it does here. At the top of the screen, you've got various file menus. These are the same as you have for things like Word or Adobe products, where you click on them and they give you a series of other options. I don't want you to panic too much about the quantity of icons and things here. A lot of this you won't need to use in the course of your work. One of the things you may want to do, though, is just adjust this screen to provide you with all the toolbars that you will find of use. You'll notice that along here, these things are all currently greyed out. And if I get to this little arrow here and I click down, it presents me with more options. Same options above, but essentially it's saying within this little toolbar from here to here, I've got more options that are hidden. Same here. Same here. And it could be that you want to move some of these so that they are instantly accessible to you. And to do that, you could click on these little speckled areas here. Just one click and hold and move. And you can have them down the side, you can have them up there. It's entirely up to you how you want to do it. And when you move them around, they will expand. Some of these icons should be familiar to you. So you've got things like start a new project, open a project, save buttons, print. Down the bottom here, you've got pan, you've got zoom in and out. You've got the refresh button. But some of the others will be less familiar to you, but we'll tackle them in a short while. Before we progress and start to load up our data, the first thing we should do, which is good practice, is to save the file. So I'm going to click Save, and I'm going to call it Winterbourne Barn. I've already prepared one before, but I'm going to overwrite this. So you just type any name that you want whatever you're doing as a file name and just click save wherever you want to save it on your computer. At the top I now have Quantum GIS 1.8 Winterbourne Barn. You could create as many projects as you want. You could have projects for every different essay you did, or one for your dissertation, one for your fieldwork report. It's entirely up to you. Okay, so now that you've got an idea of the screen and the icons and you've managed to move some things around, we're going to load some of our data that we downloaded from Digimap. When we used the previous tutorial and downloaded Digimap data, we downloaded raster data. And if you remember, raster data is nothing more than image files. So a JPEG, a TIFF, a bitmap, they're all raster data. And a raster, as I said, is nothing more than an image. So if you were to go out with a digital camera, take a picture, download that to your computer, that's a raster image. If you were to take a RAF aerial photo that somebody from English Heritage sent you, or scan a Ordnance Survey 1 to 25,000 map onto your computer, that's a raster image. It's made up of a series of coloured blobs called pixels. The more pixels you have, the better the quality of the image. So the data that we're going to be making use of today is going to be raster. Now, normally raster data has no geographical information on it. It's something you have to assign at a later point. And that's a technique I'm going to show you in a little bit, how you could take, for example, an aerial photo, or maybe in your case an earthwork survey, and put it over a modern Ordnance Survey map. First of all, we're going to load up data that has somebody somewhere has already put geographical information into. To do that, we're going to load raster data. And up the top here, you've got these series of icons, and the one I want you to go to is this one here. If you hold your mouse over without doing anything, it will come up with Add Raster Layer. I'm going to click on that, and I want you to go to wherever you stored the stuff you downloaded from Digimap. And I'm going to start by going into the raster 50,000. When I go into this folder, you'll see there are three file types, and the one that I'm interested in is this one that says TIFF, because TIFF is a file format for a raster image. You may have come across TIFFs or JPEGs before. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight it and I'm going to say open. And now you can see that a map has appeared on the screen, a 1 to 50,000 map. And if you use some of these icons here, you can zoom in and out. Okay, down into Thornbury, you can draw rectangles to zoom in and out. This option here, the little hand, allows you to pan. You can zoom to its maximum scale. You can refresh the map. There's a few other things. This option here allows you to measure. See, measuring in kilometers. On the left hand side under the layers, you'll see that it's given you this file ST68, and that's this entire square that you can see here. It's called ST68. Because it's the first one we loaded up, we know we loaded the one to 50,000. To make this all a little more organized, we're going to create folders into which we're going to place these grids, these little tiles. To do that, I want you to right click on the white anywhere and add new group. And in this case, I'm going to call this 50k. Click anywhere again, and you'll see we now have two different folders. One looks like a folder, one you can still see is a little thumbnail of this. What I want you to do is just highlight with one left click on here, and then just drag, hold the left mouse button and drag it down. And what you're looking for is the short blue bar. The long blue bar will just place it underneath, but here that's placing it into the 50,000. You can see it goes to that and then down into that. So what we now have is a folder that says 50,000. So if I turn that off, it disappears, turn it back on, that's my 1 to 50,000 map. What we're now going to do is load up more data, the 1 to 25,000, 1 to 10,000 and the master map data, and we are going to give groups to each of them. So let's go through this again. Add raster data. Back to where you found wherever you stored your data, into 25,000. ST68. You notice something here? File names are the same, even though they're two different maps, and this is why you want to add these groups, otherwise it will become very confusing. Add new group, in this case 25k. going to drag that down and I'm going to put him underneath. What we now have is 50k and 25k. I'm going to do the same for the 10,000s. See how the 10,000 has appeared here? Because it's at the top, it's appeared over the top of the other ones that are underneath it. So it's now dominant. Because the reason you can see the rest of this stuff around here is we only downloaded, or I only downloaded, the tile for a small area. Do that again, add new group, 10k, and I'm going to take that in. If I drag this right to the top and let go, one of the things I want you to do is to make sure that you can order these according to your own ways of outlaying maps, how you feel most comfortable. To ensure that when you move these that it updates the image to go on top, if you right click on any of these and just click update drawing order, it'll automatically refresh the map when you move these folders up and down. Okay, so you've got these three in now. We just want to introduce one more set of data, which will be the master map. In here we have 4 tiles, 4 TIFF files that we're going to add, and you'll notice them appear in green. See, right down here. And again, I'm going to add new group and call them master map. And I'm going to put them all in. Remember, short bar drags them in. Move that to the top. So what you can see here is we've actually got the 1 to 50,000, you've got a 1 to 25,000 occurring here, you've got just about to see the 1 to 10,000 there, and in here you have the master map. But actually we're too far zoomed out for any of this to be any use to us. So what we want to do is start to zoom in, just the normal plus sign. Well, actually, even as we zoom in, some of these are not particularly useful. As you can see on the right hand side, the 1 to 25,000 map, which is this, is alright at this scale, which is 1 to 27,908. We'll change that to something more sensible. Let's go 1 to 25,000. So that's okay. But this, the 1 to 10,000 and this master map, they're pretty much useless at that scale. So if you don't want them, what you can do is just turn them off, like so, and they'll disappear, and you're left with the 1 to 25,000. But a much more cunning way of using this is to set what are called scale dependent visibilities, and that means that these maps will only appear when you zoom in or zoom out to a particular level. So what we're going to do is set a scale dependent visibility for all of the tiles that we've loaded up. To do that, unfortunately we can't do it by clicking on the folders, the groups. We have to actually go into each individual one. So what I want you to do is just go into highlight one blue and just double click it, okay, with your left mouse button, and you'll be brought into a screen like this, and I want you to go to the tab at the top that says General. And down here you have what's called Scale Dependent Visibility. Click it, and then you're going to set a minimum and a maximum scale. So I'm looking at master map. I don't want master map to appear beyond 1 to 2,000, because once it gets beyond that, from my perspective, you can't see things clearly. So what I'm going to do is set a maximum of 2,000. And I'm going to do the same with the others. And you're seeing on the screen the little tiles all disappearing. Okay. You can see on the right hand side you've still got the 1 to 25,000, and here this is the 1 to 10,000 with the blue and the green. So I also want to set the 1 to 10,000. The way I do this is I set the minimum scale of my next 1 to 10,000 as what the maximum was of master map. The maximum of master map was 2,000, and so I've set that as the minimum. My maximum in this case is going to be 10,000. 25,000, I'm going to do the same again. So I'm going to start its minimum at what was the maximum of my previous, which was 10,000. And I'm going to do a maximum of 25,000. And the same with the 50,000. start him at 25,000, and I'm not going to give him a maximum at the moment. You could do a maximum if you had the 1 to 250 in there, whatever. What you'll find now is these little minus buttons allow you to close them all up. As I zoom in, you'll see that that's changed from the 1 to 50,000 to the 1 to 25. That's now changed to the 1 to 10,000, still 1 to 10. Now it's into the master map data. You don't have to change this at all now, but the one thing you do have to do, good procedure, save it. Just click your save button and that's all saved. So the next time that you load up QGIS and you load up the file you're using, you will have the scale dependent visibility set. And now's an opportunity for you to pause this tutorial, have a play around, use all of these little icons, see what they do, pan and scale, look at the coordinates, set your scales, and just get familiarity with QGIS. And when you're happy, come on back. Okay, welcome back. Well, by now you should have played around and got some familiarity with QGIS. We're now going to do some more sophisticated stuff, which is we're going to georeference images that do not have their own spatial information onto these base maps by using these base maps to determine locations. It's a process known as georeferencing, and it's particularly useful if you are, in your case, scanned and made available your earthwork surveys, or if you've got an RAF photo or another type of aerial photo that's come from English Heritage, or you've scanned a tithe map or something, you could get them to overlay directly on top of an existing base map. In order to accomplish this, what we're going to do is we have to turn on a plugin. Now, plugins are an additional tool set available to you that are designed by various people around the world. Remember, QGIS is not designed specifically for archaeologists, so lots of people have designed lots of different bits to it that don't necessarily come in pre-installed with the package. You kind of pick and choose them as you want. So what you need to do is to go up to plugins, and then you want to go to this option that says manage plugins. And as you scroll up and down, you'll see that you've got all these things here called plugins. And there are a couple of things that will be of interest to you here. And the first of these, as you scroll up and down, is this one here that says Georeferencer GDAL. And I want you to click on it so that it's got across. Mine's already got across because I've done it before. Another one that would be quite useful for you is if you scroll down, click on this Open Layers plugin as well. And that will allow you to load up Google Maps, Bing Map layers over the top of this at a later point. Say OK. Nothing in the terms of the screen has actually happened. But if you go up to raster, you now have this option that says georeferencer. And what I would like you to do is just hold your mouse over georeferencer so it turns blue, and then hold your mouse over the actual word georeferencer and click it once. And it brings up this screen. And what's going to happen is we're going to make an image appear in this screen, and we're going to assign it geographical coordinates by clicking on one point on the map on the image that's the same as a point on this map. To do that, we're going to load it up first. So here we have open raster. This little icon you should get familiar with, so you click it. What I'm going to do is, you can see I've got this aerial photo. You see the thumbnail here. I'm just going to open it up, and what I've got is this aerial photo that's appeared, and you can see this road comes up, branches round to the right, which is this road here. And what I would like to do is to assign coordinates to some of these locations to overlay this aerial photo onto this map. To do that, just going to zoom in a little bit. Now when I'm in a correct position, I then click on this little dots here, add points. Now I'm going to do this roughly. The more precise you are, the closer you zoom in, and the more points you use, the better your georeferencing will be. But just for an example, I'm going to show you. I'm going to put a point here, and it brings up this box. When I click it, the left click, it brings up this box. If you know the coordinate of that corner of the field, you could type them in here. If you don't, you can say from map canvas. That removes the little box you had before, and all you have to do is with this, go to the point you think it is, click once. Brings you up with a coordinate, and if I say OK, you'll see little red dots appeared there and a little red dots appeared there. I'm going to do this 2 more times because I need 3. So I'm going to put another one in here. from map canvas, which I think should be here. And I'm going to do it one more time, which is going to be here. So I've got 3 points, and you can see them here. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. What you would want to do, as I said, zoom in a little closer on both maps and be much more precise in where you position them. Well, when you're ready to go, you go up to this option here, this Start Georeferencing, and it's going to bring you up with another screen. Set transformation type, say OK, and this comes up. It should have transformation type preliminary 1. Leave it as is. Don't touch. If it isn't, turn it to it. Otherwise, leave that. Leave that. The only thing you're interested in on this screen is this thing that says Output Raster, because this is where you're going to create a new file. It's going to essentially copy this, but it's going to copy it with geographical information in it. Let's click on that, and then I'm just going to call this Winterboard AP. Say OK. Save. OK. And there we go. Your aerial photo has now overlaid over the top of your map. I'm going to close this down. It's going to ask me if I want to save these points. These little red points. You may choose to save them, because if you find that you haven't quite got your georeferencing right, you can load them back up, move them a bit, and it'll adapt the image into its correct position for you. But I'm going to ignore that for the moment. And so what I have here is an aerial photo that I can turn on and off, and you can see vaguely it's pretty much in the right location. Now I'm just going to run through that again by doing something else, which is I'm going to zoom in close here, and you can see that as we zoom in I'm coming in a little bit closer to the barn. This is the barn here, 14th century tithe barn with manor house, dovecot, fish ponds all around it. For the moment, I'm just going to turn this Winterbourne AP layer off, and I'm back to the master map data. I'm just going to zoom in again a little bit more. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to georeference some geophysical surveys that I did. So to do that, we go through the same process we did before. Raster, georeferencer, georeference. I go up to Add Raster, Geophysics. In here I have two which look the same. When I hold over it, one of them will be a bitmap and the other one is a JPEG, and the one that I'm after is the JPEG. For whatever reason, the bitmap doesn't seem to want to work in QGIS, so I've transformed it into a JPEG. And up it comes like this. Now what you're going to find is when I do the georeferencing, there's going to be a black outline that comes around this, and that's because, if you can see, I'm going to put it around this part of the barn here. But the image itself should be rotated in this direction to be facing north. North is that way, but in this image it thinks it's going up that way. So what you should really do is, prior to doing this, go into Photoshop or something and just orientate it as close to the north direction as you think it should be. But for the purpose of today's tutorial, I'm not going to do that. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on some points again. So I've got this highlighted. I'm going to click here, pick from map canvas. Should be this here. Okay, this bit of mine is here on map canvas. Okay, and I'm going to go for this point here from map canvas, just that point there. The more you do, remember, the better the quality. The closer you zoom in, the better the quality. The more precise you are trying to be, the better that your georeferencing will be. Same process again. Hit the green button, set an output raster name, which is this. Okay, and I'm just, you can call it whatever you want. I'll call it Winterboard Geophysics. Save. Say OK. And there we go. We have geophysics overlaid on top of the modern Ordnance Survey mapping. Now, I can put the aerial photo on underneath and still have that over the top. That's what I'm saying about this black area. That's because I didn't orientate this image appropriately the first time. So what it's got is, what I should have done is in Photoshop orientated the image so it was already facing this direction. So that's how you georeference. You can turn things on and off. You can see that they overlay. pretty well. And in this case, we've got field drain, we've got a possible building here going underneath the barn, and importantly, we have this here, which I suspect is a moat, or the outlines of a moat. Certainly one of the fields over here is called Great Moat Field. So it looks like the medieval barn, and possibly its manor house and its dovecot were all moated. Come towards the end of this tutorial, but there are a couple of extra things I need to show you before we finish. First of these is you don't have to keep turning things on and off or setting scale dependent visibility if you want to see two things at once. For example, you may want to actually see what the underlying base map looks like with the aerial photo over the top. And the way to do that is, this is the aerial photo that we georeferenced before. This is it here in its file on the left hand side. If I double click that, I come into the same screen you were used to before with scale dependent visibility, but the thing we're after at the top is transparency, because I can make it partially transparent. So let's go for, say, let's go 40% or so. Say OK, and there we have the AP has been made partially transparent. It's given a 40% transparency, and because of that I can see what's underneath. And that's a particularly useful tool if you're doing map regression techniques, because what you can do is download the Ordnance Survey historic map data from Digimap, and you can also get hold of, say, tithe maps or surveyors maps or estate maps, scan them yourselves, go through the georeferencing process, and you can actually then set transparencies for each of these things, so that you can actually see the Ordnance Survey map over the top of the tithe map, over the top of an estate map. And you have to just play around with what you want in terms of settings and how much you want. So that's georeferencing, process of getting your stuff onto GIS, so that you can now print this out. And that's the penultimate thing we're going to look at. Very brief look at how you print. Imagine you want to print this screen. You've done all your work, you've got your geophysics on, or you've got your earthwork survey on. What you want to do is go to File. You can save as image, which will save the screen, but actually you might want to add things in such as scale bars and north arrows. To do that, you want to go to New Print Composer. Click on that and you'll be brought up with this screen. Something similar. You want to add in a map first of all. So you want to go up to this, you should be familiar with this, add a new map. Then all you do is you hit it once and nothing happens. What you have to do is just go to the corner of the screen and just hold your left mouse button and drag and pull. Let go, and there it appears. Okay. Now you could say, well, why do I need that? I could just print the screen. Indeed you could, but here you've got some tools that are quite useful. For example, we have up here scale bar. So what I can do is go down to here, put a scale bar in. So in this case, I've given it a 100 meter scale bar, but you can adapt this accordingly, and it will change as needed. You've got different styles of scale bar. You can play around with its heights and its widths, and you can also use things at the top here to add in arrows. You can add in north arrows, you can add in labels. If you wanted to point at a particular feature and add a label in, you can do all of that up here. And when you're ready, you've got a few options. You can either print it directly, you can save it as a PDF, or you can export it as an image. So if we click Export as Image, brings you up to another type of screen you should be familiar with. At the bottom here, you can save as a file type. I'm going to go for JPEG, and I'm just going to call it WBB for Windbourne Barn. Save as, or just save. And it's doing its stuff. And we should find that in a moment it will have saved and output that to your folder. Before we go and have a look at, actually we'll have a look at that now. Let's go to that, Winterbourne Barn. I've come into my folder, it's got my AP in there, it's got the original AP, and here's WBB, which I just output There we go. With the scale I just set, if I want a north arrow and everything, it would be on there. And that is now a JPEG which you can incorporate into your documents for your field report. Just before we finish, the last thing we're going to do is just show you how to make use of that Open Layers plugin we used before. And that is, you go to your plugins, go to Open Layers, and because you've clicked on it in the Manage Plugins before, you can now select them. So if you want, you can select any of these layers, for example, Google Satellite layer, and there we have Google's satellite image uploaded. Now that's going to conclude our tutorial on QGIS, and I hope you found it useful. You can now go and make use of that for your fieldwork report, and good luck.